I'm Michael Smeltzer, and I am here late on a Wednesday night. I wanted to record a little bit of a recap about the USC game that was in attendance for at the Big House, Michigan's first ever stripe out. So here we are, folks. We're live on X. We are live on YouTube, and I will record this and push it out on the Blue Wall podcast as well. Like I said, I was there. I don't live locally in Michigan, but I always go to at least one game a year. Last year, I was lucky enough to be at a few: Ohio State, the national championship. But this USC game was different. Something about the energy and the vibe of this game was special. I'm not saying it was a bigger win than those other games, and I'm not even saying that the atmosphere was more electric, but I think given this roster, this coaching staff, and the odds that they were up against with a first-time starter, Alex Orji at quarterback, Colston Loveland not suiting up, right? Michigan's All-American tight end, leading receiver, not suiting up for the game. Basically the deck was stacked against Michigan, and the fans showed up. First ever stripe out meaning you had maize sections, you had blue sections. I was skeptical that Michigan fans were going to be able to pull this off, but as everything started to fill in the Big House, you could start to see the stripes emerge. There was a special energy in the air. We don't get to see Michigan play a team like USC very often, especially not in this format, right? This is the first ever Big Ten matchup, Michigan versus USC. And welcome to the Big Ten, USC, because early and often in this one, USC had to face what a Big Ten defense can bring to the table. But overall, atmosphere was electric. I give it a 9 out of 10 on the stripe out. It was pretty damn good, but most importantly, Michigan came out with a win, 27-24. Let's start talking about the most obvious player to talk about, Alex Orji. He came out, and I thought really early in the game, and other people might have a different perception of this, but I thought early in the game he actually established himself as the right guy for the job, that he was clearly a better option than Davis Warren at quarterback. And I'm not really sure why. I can't really pinpoint it. Obviously, Warren is uh, a more experienced passer than Alex Orji, but I thought you could just kind of tell with the energy and the swagger and the management and the leadership that Orji possessed. And then, of course, the fact that he brings the ground, his the element of his legs that he brings to the table. I think it just makes the defense always have to be aware and think about what's going on. And what really happened was early on in the game, you could see USC stacking the box. There were a couple of plays where I could almost with my finger like point and like circle all 11 defensive players for USC. And so you would think, well, that's going to stop the run. They're bringing everybody up close. But what that really did was it exposed the second level of their defense. And so when you have a guy like Kalel Mullings or Donovan Edwards get to that second level of the defense, they're gone every time because there's nobody there. And a team like USC that historically, can struggle with tackling and those sorts of things, that started to rear its ugly head up again in a typical Lincoln Riley fashion. Now, granted, this USC defense is better than some of the Oklahoma and USC defenses that we've seen Lincoln Riley field in the past. But nevertheless, I think Michigan showed that this USC defense is not necessarily up to par with where they probably want to be. Back to Alex Orji early on, he had a wide open Marlon Klein that I thought he was going to hit about 20 yards up the field, which would have really changed the way this game felt for Alex Orji. It was interesting. Marlon Klein ended up being the leading receiver in this game with, I want to say 10 yards. I've never seen anything like that. A leading receiver with 10 receiving yards. But anyway, he had Marlon Klein open. The reason why he didn't hit him over the middle was the pass rush, was basically coming from, I want to say Dom Jadis was in the game at that time. I think somebody was coming up the middle. Somebody missed a block. And so Orji scrambled a little bit. He recognized that Marlon Klein was open and forced it to him. And that was, if you guys can remember, that was the play that um, he kind of forced it. At that point, Klein had drifted to the sideline. He forced it to Klein. It looked like a bad pass. It was kind of a bad pass. It was a late decision, but it was the right idea, just a little bit late. And then after that, we really didn't see Michigan go downfield with Alex Orji's arm at all. But we saw, Michigan do what Michigan does. It was probably the offensive line's best run blocking game of the season. Actually, I'm just going to say it. It was the offensive line's best run blocking game of the season. The pass protection still struggling. I mean, I guess you could say they improved in this game, but that probably wouldn't be factual. The pass protection has not been good in any of the four Michigan games that we've seen thus far, which is kind of weird, the juxtaposition of such a good run blocking team, because they have been good. They've been really good at run blocking. Not perfect, but good. But then to be so poor at pass blocking, and not to pick on anybody, I don't want to pick on anybody, but Evan Link is the weakest link on that offensive line, no pun intended. Evan Link continually gives up pressure, and it makes me wonder if we're going to see some other guys maybe get a chance. We thought we'd see Gentry a little bit more coming into the season, but Link won the job. He's had a couple good plays in there, but really consistency is what you want to see at a tackle spot. He's holding down the right tackle spot, and it always seems that's where the pressure is coming from. And so for a guy like Orji, if you're gonna see him have success passing the ball down the field, it'll help to get Colston Loveland back, but I wouldn't expect to see monstrous passing performances from Orji if he's not getting pass protection. I mean, that's what even great quarterbacks need, pass protection, but a guy that's still learning the ropes and working out his air game is going to need that even more. But there's a lot of positives to take out of this game. Of course there is. It's a big win. USC was ranked number 11. Michigan got out with a victory. Kalel Mullings, Donovan Edwards, Alex Orji all thrived on the ground. Of course, Donovan Edwards coughed it up and put Michigan's defense in a little bit of a compromised position late, and that was really the last we saw of Donovan Edwards. It was the Kalel Mullings show after that. We all knew that Kalel Mullings could be a great running back this year. A lot of Michigan fans that knew, that saw what was brewing in him last season and over the offseason, knew that this would probably not be exclusively the Donovan Edwards show. But what we failed to maybe see, and I had my suspicions that this might happen, but he has become one of the best running backs in college football. I think you can say that now after this game. He put this Michigan team on his back, especially with that last drive. Busted that run that was just, I mean, he is so much like Hassan Haskins. We're seeing this guy just break tackles and show grit and get better as the game is going. Really good runner, powerful, shifty between the tackles. But this was the Kalel Mullings show. Donovan Edwards got himself a touchdown, which was cool. Alex Orji, let me see here. He had 43 yards rushing, and that's good. I think that even accounts for, there was a sack or two that he took in there, and so I think that adds a negative to that number. So Alex Orji actually did decent on the ground, and we didn't even see him break a long run. I do think that seeing Alex Orji break some long runs this season is something that's in store for Michigan fans, and so it's not out of the question that we see Orji, Edwards, and Mullings push 100 yards on any given day. But Kalel Mullings, this was his breakout performance. He second straight 150 plus yard rushing performance, game winning touchdown, fourth and goal with the game on the line. He got in the end zone. Absolutely special performance. He's now 12th nationally in total rushing yards, in FBS, which is huge for a guy that coming in wasn't even considered RB1. He was RB2. So it was the Kalel Mullings breakout game, and there's no reason to believe that this momentum will slow down for him. This is the guy that Michigan is going to feed. Of course, Donovan Edwards is going to get his carries, but Mullings has earned the right to touch the ball more than any other player on this team, and that's going to happen. So let's go to the defensive side of the ball for a little bit. I thought this was one of Michigan's best defensive performances of the last few years, actually. And, obviously there's been some better performances. That Michigan's defense the last couple of years under Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter has been phenomenal. But this was the Wink Martindale, statement game that we were looking for. And this was by far the best called game by Wink Martindale so far on the defensive side of the ball. I was a little worried about the linebacker position coming in. Jimmy Rolder was questionable. Michael Pollard was out. Jayshon Barham and Ernest Hausman, of course, are studs, but not having depth at the linebacker position is always sketchy, especially in a big game. Turned out Jimmy Rolder played. He played pretty well, I thought. It was, he seems to be getting more and more comfortable, which is good because at times in the past, Jimmy Rolder has been a little bit of a liability at the linebacker spot. Talented young man, so I'm not gonna shit on him too much here. But seeing Rolder get in the game, get comfortable, make plays, not give up any huge plays, that was huge because it gives Barham and Hausman some breathers here and there. They get to rotate out, which is good. So despite the pregame concerns about injuries, the linebackers showed up. But, man, this was the Josiah Stewart game. I think Josiah Stewart had the most impressive edge performance of any Michigan player since Aiden Hutchinson in that 2021 Ohio State game. I know that's a big statement to make, but I'm thinking back, and, you had a couple solid games with Mike Morris. We had Jalen Harrell and Braden McGregor last year. Of course, Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore also played last year. But I think since the game in 2021 where Aiden Hutchinson had 3 sacks and cemented himself among the great defensive players of all time, not just in Michigan history, but in college football history, I think this is the best performance since then by a Michigan edge. I'm not saying it was as good as that performance, but let's be real. I mean, it's top 15 team. Josiah Stewart was a menace. I mean, he was consistently getting pressures on Miller Moss, the USC quarterback. He was almost single-handedly the reason Michigan got off to an early dominant lead. And then on the defensive side of the ball, he was almost single-handedly the reason that they were able to finish the game. Other guys on that D-line showed up, though. I mean, it was finally nice to see Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham show up to the capabilities that we know they can play at. I thought Mason Graham was oddly quiet the last couple of games, especially against Arkansas State, where you're thinking this guy's going to be able to do whatever he wants against an Arkansas State offensive line. He was suspiciously absent in that game, which I couldn't really figure out, but there's nothing to worry about. I mean, he showed up against USC. He looked great. Kenneth Grant looked great. But just to revisit, I don't want to move on from Josiah Stewart just yet. He dominated the offensive line. You could make the argument that he's the leader of this D line. And that says a lot when you got a guy like Mason Graham that's expected to be maybe a top 10 draft pick next year, and then Kenneth Grant, who also could be a first round draft pick. To say that Josiah Stewart may be the leader on this, in the trenches on the defensive side, that's pretty special. And It's a team, it's a team effort. Wink Martindale was calling some really impressive, creative blitzes and coverages in this game. He actually didn't blitz as much as I thought he would in this game. His blitz rate was a little lower than I expected, but it felt like he was blitzing a lot because they all seemed to be getting home. They all seemed to be getting pressure on Miller Moss. So Stewart finished the day with 2 sacks, 4 tackles, was consistently in USC's backfield. On the season, 4 sacks, which I want to say leads the Big Ten right now. Somebody feel free to put in the comments if there's somebody else that has more than 4 sacks. I've been wrong before, but I think that's the leader currently in sacks. And then he was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, rightfully so. And so he's really earned himself a name among the top defensive players in the Big Ten, and pretty soon maybe in the country as well. Like I mentioned, Wink Martindale showed some creativity with his defensive schemes, especially in the second quarter. I was noticing some really cool things from him. It seemed like they were always a step ahead of this Lincoln Riley offense. Like they just couldn't really get it going in the first half. That is, in the second half. I mean, we'll get to that. But yeah, we'll see. I got a funny comment that I'm not going to read in the chat here, trying to throw me off here. But we'll keep it going. We'll talk about football for sure. So the creativity that Wink Martindale was showing, man, like I would say one of the most special plays that I remember, and you guys that are a little more well versed on like defensive football schemes will probably know exactly what this is called. I don't know what it's called, but it was really cool to see Makari Page, shift up into the linebacker spot and then see Ernest Hausman get out on the edge, and the way that they were dropping into coverages and blitzing from those positions were pretty special. Um, and then, kind of wrapping up the first half, Kenneth Grant ended the first half with a huge stop, getting that sack. Josiah Stewart was also in the backfield. And that was a pretty solid way to end the half. Then you come out in the third quarter, and it's like a different team came out in the third quarter. Honestly, I would say I was nervous. The big house got quiet. The stripe out crowd was not quite as energetic. You could kind of hear a pin drop when USC came out and scored that first touchdown. They cut the game a little bit closer, and then Will Johnson did Will Johnson things. He is an All-American cornerback for a reason. He was basically baiting Miller Moss to throw that ball. He jumped that route. He got a pick six. Michigan went up 20-10. Second pick six of the season for Will Johnson. Third of his career, which actually makes him the all-time career leader in Michigan history for pick sixes, which is pretty special. Later in the game, there was kind of a bizarre play that was kind of wild. There was that stop where Kenneth Grant he recovered the fumble. Looked like he was trying, it was big boy. When a big boy gets the ball in his hands and he tries to take it the other way, he recovered the fumble. He was running back the other way, and he got stripped, and the possession changed again. And so while Michigan managed to get a crucial stop there, Kenneth Grant, made a little bit of a boneheaded play. I get it. He was putting in some effort, but gave the ball back to USC. A couple plays later, there was a breakdown in coverage. USC scored, and then it was 20-17. And then let's just kind of revisit the end of this game and what that looked like. When USC scored again, it was 24 to 20. So 4-point lead, which oddly enough was the line, kind of what the line ended at, which was USC favored by 4. Alex Orji gets the ball with 89, 90 yards to go. Really needs to drive it all the way down the field. and it's not looking good. I mean, Michigan, their offense had not gotten a first down in that entire half, and they needed to go 90 yards. And then Kalel Mullings breaks that run, which was one of the most fantastic runs really that I've seen in a long time. He breaks a couple tackles. He goes into full beast mode. He gets it down inside the 10-yard line. They hand it to him again on 1st and goal. 2nd and goal, they try a little bit of a questionable play. They did that little rollout with Orji to the right, which, of course, Orji has thrown a couple touchdowns on that play before, but it was a little questionable to take the ball out of Kalel Mullings' hands at that time. Uh, but they wisened up on 3rd and 4th down. They gave it to Mullings, and really that 4th down play, it was so suspenseful in the big house. Everybody was holding their breath. It was about a yard and a half to go. Kalel Mullings got the ball, and he would not be denied. He scored. Michigan wins 27-24 over the 11th ranked USC Trojans. Welcome to the Big Ten, USC. That's how big boy football is played. But now let's look at the larger landscape. So essentially, if Michigan loses that game, they're probably not ranked, right? They probably fall out. They're 500. They're 2-2. They probably fall out of the top 25. But with a win, now Michigan is ranked number 12 in the AP poll, and of course, with a 12-team playoff, being in or near the top 12 is certainly the goal. If the playoffs were today, I don't know if Michigan gets in, because I think that a lower ranked conference champ might squeeze in. But nevertheless, being in the top 10 to 12 is where you want to be with this new 12-team playoff format. So this, I mean, really that last play and just this game in general was a huge swing game for Sharon Moore and company, and really a defining moment for this team. I mean, everybody's a little nervous. Are we going to fall back into the Rich Rod Brady Hoke thing now that Harbaugh's gone? Like, are we going to be able to win big games? And this certainly answers that question, at least momentarily, which is, okay, now Michigan, their only loss is to the number one team in the country. Texas really does look like the number one team in the country now that Michigan's defensive line has dominated USC, and we saw how Texas's offensive line dominated Michigan's defensive line. I think it's reasonable to assume that Texas might be the best team in the country. But now this Michigan team, that being their only loss and now being the top ranked one-loss team in the country, they're sitting pretty, right? And so there's some tough games coming up that are not to be slept on, especially when Alex Orji literally only threw for 32 yards. Like, that's going to have to be looked at. That's going to have to be built upon. I know that Kirk Campbell, the quarterback coach, and Sharon Moore are looking at more creative ways to get Orji involved and get his arm involved. But Kalel Mullings has become a cornerstone of this offense. He's going to be fed the ball early and often, and Alex Orji will have to make some plays with his arm. But I wouldn't hold your breath and think that all of a sudden he's going to be throwing the ball 40 times a game, because that's not going to happen. That's not the identity of this team. But Orji does appear to be a leader, and he does appear to have command of this offense and the trust of the other guys on the team. And so I would suspect that he starts every game for the rest of the year, barring a major meltdown, and that next year it might be the Jaden Davis show. We'll see. We'll see what the Alex Orji trajectory really looks like at Michigan. But looking ahead to Minnesota, if you want Alex Orji to have a breakout passing performance, I'm sorry, but Minnesota's not the game that it's likely going to happen. I was actually, when I was doing research for this Minnesota matchup, I was hoping this would be a favorable matchup for Alex Orji to get some things going through the air. Minnesota's pass defense has been standout. They're allowing only 99. That seems like a typo to me, but I think they're only allowing 99 passing yards per game. That's what happens when you face Iowa, right? It pulls the average down, but their passing defense has been a strength of this team. Uh, but their run defense has been suspect. And so what does this mean? Well, it means that Michigan's offensive game plan probably matches up pretty well with dominating this game. I wouldn't expect a lot of points. I would expect Michigan to probably handle this game. Maybe 24-7 or 24-10, something like that. I just don't know if Michigan's going to be able to run away and get 40 or 50 points or anything like that. They could. It really depends on just how suspect this Minnesota rushing defense is. Um, but so on offense, Minnesota has averaged 117 rushing yards per game, but they've struggled to find a rhythm against tougher opponents like Iowa. So like these rushing yards that they have gotten, which has been inconsistent at best, have come against smaller schools. I want to say they played Nevada and another small school, so they're not matching up super well against larger schools. Even North Carolina, who got embarrassed by James Madison this last week, Minnesota was in kind of a barn burner week 1 with them. But their defense has been opportunistic. They've forced 7 interceptions this season, which is another reason I don't know if seeing Alex Orji throw the ball a bunch in this game is a good idea. Their passing game has been a little bit limited, and they've thrown 3 interceptions, so we could very easily see this Michigan defense get some turnovers in this game. And so when it's all said and done, I believe Michigan is a 9-point favorite, but Vegas is basically saying what I was saying, which is the over under is 35.5 points. And so nobody expects this to be a high scoring game in any way, shape, or form. But hopefully Michigan can get a win, move to 4-1 overall, 2-0 in the Big Ten. Thank you guys for hanging out with me late on a Wednesday night. I've been traveling. I wanted to make sure that I was able to get this podcast in so we could talk a little bit about that big win for Michigan in Ann Arbor. I'll be back next week to talk about the Michigan game. Make sure you follow on, all the social media platforms. I basically live on Twitter. That's at Wolverine Cron is the Wolverine Chronicle Twitter, but you guys can also look up the YouTube, the TikTok. Definitely subscribe to the Blue Wall podcast with Michael Smeltzer. I interview recruits. I have fun doing these things solo like I'm doing right now, and I live, eat, and breathe Michigan football. So I'll see you guys next week. As always, go Blue.